Welcome to the Clarity Advisor Show, where you'll learn how to grow your team today. Join Ken Trupke and his guests as they discuss what works and doesn't work to grow your team in today's world. And now, your host, Ken Trupke.
Hello, and welcome to the Clarity Advisor Show. Agency is not a word most people use to describe what they want in their life, but it's a key principle of a free society. My guest today, Gary Pinkerton, saw his family struggle financially during the 70s, and after a time in the Navy as a submarine captain, where he learned a lot about teams and leadership, he entered the world of personal finance and wealth management. Today, Gary serves clients who value agency in their lives and are looking to continue to contribute to the betterment of their fellow citizens. From sunny Florida, please welcome my good friend, Gary Pinkerton. Gary, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much. I really enjoy it. I've been looking forward to doing this for a long time, Ken.
Oh, excellent. So let's jump right into Prosperity Life Solutions. Who are your clients and what problem are you solving for them?
Yeah, so primarily my clients are individuals who are looking for alternatives to kind of the more typical market-based financial investing. So people who are business owners, they're real estate investors, they're looking for things that they can do alternative to just, buying something, a stock, bond, or mutual fund.
Okay. And one of the things that you've talked about is agency and how you help your clients get agency. Talk about what that means to you and how you help your clients.
Yeah, so what it means to me to have agency is to be able to do with your life what you want to do. So you can live where you want, you can spend your days the way you want. The reason that is so important and why I help clients do it, and then I'll get a little bit into how I help them. Why I help clients do that is that what I've learned over time is that this amazing 250-year experiment that we have, that our founding fathers courageously put their own necks on the line by signing a document saying that they were willing to take on the most powerful person on the planet, who was King George at the time in England, right? So they did that because they believed that there were some things missing in what and how governments did things in England and all across Europe. And what was missing was the ability for individuals to share in the spoils, their own spoils of war, and what they have produced, whether it be a service or a good, something that they produce for the world. They weren't able to share in that. And our founding fathers believed that that really cut back on life as well as it cut back on production. And so their thought was, if you allow somebody to keep some of what they produce, it will cause them to produce more. And what that resulted in was a country of a bunch of people who had agency. Like, it may not have been like the most exciting life for them. They were fighting all kinds of crazy things that could kill them every day out here in this new world of theirs. And they had feast and famine. I mean, they went through all kinds of crazy, challenging things in their lives. So it wasn't simple. They didn't have beautiful air conditioning and all the stuff we have today. But what they did have was agency in their own lives. If they needed something, either they created it or somebody in their community created it for them. And so when the government came around, when George Washington was, leading the rebellion, and then they asked him to be the first president, there was this sense that, okay, sure, I will do my penance. I will serve the people, but please make me do it one time, And so it wasn't, you didn't get paid well. There was no such thing as a professional politician. People wanted to be around their family and their businesses, and they were willing to serve, but for a period of time, and then get back to business, because they realized that they were just working for others. They were carrying out the bidding of the people who elected them. And so the power was in the people. And I don't mean to give a civics lesson here, but as we have evolved, as we've become more of an industrialized nation, as we've become a nation of employees predominantly, that takes away from the ability of people to have the power. And it just results in a lot of politicians, frankly, doing this as a professional career and forgetting that they work for the people. And so they kind of try to change laws to continue to grow and grow and grow the power of the pen, the power of the purse, most importantly. And so getting people to do what they want, right? And so to have a free society, to have a free world, it is my belief, it is my understanding after studying this stuff, that we need the power in the hands of the people, which means they need to have their own agency. And so I left military service where I was trying to protect America I was helping to protect America from outside forces of threat outside our country, to really working on a more fundamental level to help people understand why the biggest threat is actually on the inside. And that is kind of our, letting our government kind of get out of control, and us forgetting that, how our country was created and how we need to, hold on to things. So obviously I'm a conservative, right? Because I want to conserve the Constitution. But I think it's extremely important that we empower people to understand what is necessary to be able to control their own destiny, have their own business, have their own cash flowing type assets that they can count on, right? And so fundamentally, I help my clients understand most important asset in their lives is themselves. And so if you're listening to this, instead of watching it, like I'm pointing to myself, right? And so I only want to work with people who think that they're the most important thing in their life. They're the thing that can produce the most value for their family and for those loved ones around them. And then secondly, it is that business or that real estate investment thing that they directly own that they can control, right? They have influence into whether it goes well or not well. So I help them set up a financial situation so they can do that.
Okay. And I know you work with them on reducing taxes as well as finding those alternative assets, not necessarily investing in the market.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So when so kind of a little bit of my history, I did 30 years of naval service, and near the end of it, it was right around the time of the Great Recession. And I was on the USS Tucson deployed in service of, presidential orders. And so I was paying no attention to anything, really trying to hold everything together, frankly. And it turned out just fine. I mean, it was actually quite successful. Yet what I didn't pay any attention to was my family's finances. And so as I was leaving that, I recognized that there's a lot I still needed to learn. Like this whole go to school, get good grades, get a safe, secure job, and let somebody else pay attention to the money. And I loved how you got the little Christmas jingle going there a moment ago, Ken, right? So like it is not a lie, but it's not the whole story, right? Like that doesn't alone ensure that you are successful. What ensures you're successful, just like you being successful with your health, with your relationships, with your spiritual side, is that you'll pay attention to it, right? And you take some ownership and accountability for it. I had done none of that for the first 25 years of my adult life. I just done what I thought we were supposed to do, which is hand my money to an advisor who gives it to a mutual fund dude, who, et cetera, right? And so when I saw that not go well in the Great Recession, it caused me to pause. And so I threw myself into learning a lot of things, studying about world history. How had people gained wealth and held on to it? And there are some stealers of wealth, right? This is not a surprise to anybody. One of the big ones is setting up your life in a way in which you can protect yourself from unnecessary taxes. And so if you're paying far more than your share of taxes, well, you're not going to get ahead like that. And then the other one is like protecting yourself from bad actors out there. And then, so you got to have a good asset protection strategy, for example. And then the third one is just simply doing stuff that's stupid, like connecting up with somebody who doesn't have your best interest in mind, not doing the due diligence and investing in, coal mines in a place where they don't have coal. Like whatever it is, like you got to do the due diligence. You got to align yourself with ethical people who have your interests in mind in a way in which you know enough about it where you can pay attention.
So if I can tie that together by helping your clients get those assets and things aligned, get their business things and their business activities aligned, reduce taxes, have assets that you can control, that produces the income, that produces the agency to have control over your life, which helps to promote a free and virtuous society. Is that a fair summary?
That is a fair summary. And I would add to it that along the way, for that to be successful, they have to gain the knowledge of how to do it correctly, and then the confidence that they can do it, right? And the demonstrated, results that they could do it. Hate him or love him, this is just the one person that I think of with this statement. Many have said this, but okay, so let me back up a little bit before I get to that individual. So, Jim Rohn said that, make it a goal to become a millionaire, not because of the money that you receive, but the person you have to become to get there, right? Amazing sage advice, right? And so I want to help people become that individual that has the confidence and the knowledge to become a millionaire. And then if they lose it all, okay, now I was going to go to the Donald Trump example. He said that he learned nothing in the good times and he learned everything in the bad times. And he also demonstrated that when he lost everything with the whole casino thing that happened a couple decades ago, he just won it right back, right? Or he got it right back. Why? because he was the person who could have that kind of money. Like if you don't become the person who can be the millionaire or the billionaire, then it doesn't matter if you get it in the lottery, you won't have it very long because you're not the person who should be shepherding that, right? So yeah, helping the individuals understand how to do that and providing them or explaining to them, helping them implement tools like overfunded life insurance as a banking system and like tax reducing investments like oil and gas industry and things like that. That's how I help them implement with the tools, educate, and then give them, help them with the confidence side to pull it off again if they have to.
Yeah. And so what I'm hearing too, I love that point about educating people and helping them to become the people that can achieve these things. That plays into that agency too. I know I've heard you say that if you want to use like a running analogy, you can't run a race for someone. Everybody's got to run their own race. What you can do is coach them and give them those tools to help them run well.
Exactly. Yeah. Really what my role is to be, and you can call it a coach, but I think of it really as a guide, right? It's my job to be a guide, not even a mentor, just a guide, like be somebody who's on the path. Like if you're going to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, right? It's a little bit scary, but it's a whole lot more scary if your Sherpa guide dies about halfway up, right? Because you were depending on that, like you're doing the work. I can't do, like you said, can't run the race for him. I can't climb Mount Kilimanjaro. The Sherpa cannot climb Mount Kilimanjaro for me. But without the Sherpa, I'm in big trouble, right? So it has always been my mission to be slightly out in front of my clients, all of them, so that when they come around the bend and they say, okay, this is new, I don't know what to do in this step, I can say, okay, I've been there. Let me show you how to do that. And so as I grow, either my clients that I had back before I knew all this stuff are now there with me, or I'm gaining new clients who are at that level. So I didn't in the past focus heavily on business owners. Now I've been a business owner for a while, right? And so I'm ready to pull those kinds of people in. I talked conceptually about legacy trust, irrevocable trust, which can get extremely complex, business succession planning, all those things. And so I'm working my way into that as a guide on the path. Doing it with seat of the pants knowledge, I think is super important.
Oh, so good. Yeah. I like the distinction of the guide analogy because that's someone ahead of you on the path who's been there before or is just a little bit ahead of you. So good. So good. All right. Well, so I want to get to some military stuff here. So first, you just take us through a little bit of your personal history. I think you've got a great story to share. How is it that you came to this place guiding people? Take us through some of your story.
Yeah, so it's a little scary when I say, well, in the 1980s, I won't stay too long on all these decades, but I'm 54 years old, and I grew up late 70s, early 80s when I was entering high school, and so Jimmy Carter had just left the presidency, and for those of you who don't have the pleasure of having lived through the 70s and 80s, let me just paint a quick little picture. It's like today, except like 3x that big, right? So there's things called stagflation that we kind of talk about today, but haven't really experienced. And that's where the costs are going up 3 or 4 times as fast as people's wages. And we lived through it for, 5 to 10 years, not a couple of years so far, right? I think what's happened here recently is bad. But if you have perspective from the 70s and 80s, you can say, yeah, it's not that bad. You don't have gas lines where you're allowed to, only fill up your car every other day, depending on the number on your license plate. And you don't have, massive debt that has come from 15, 17% interest rate loans, right? So here we have this dairy farm, 700-acre dairy farm in Southern Illinois. I'm a freshman in high school, and the banker starts coming every month and then every week. And then so I didn't really understand finance, but I understood that wasn't good. And the interest rates got to 21%. We ended up, losing the farm. Dad's health had failed from all the stress associated with that. And he's a little older and really not in good health anyway. And mom had never had a W-2 job. So mom is scrambling around to get a W-2 job. We're living in this rented trailer on my uncle's land. And there's this little machine shop. And so I'm trying to run business, like making money. I wouldn't call it a business. I definitely didn't know what entrepreneurship meant. I was just trying to put food on the table as a teenager. And I didn't enjoy that, frankly. And so once mom got her job going, my sister and I were given the ability to go off to college. The problem is neither one of us had any money, but we did do that whole study hard thing because we wanted out of that environment, right? That was the chip that we had on our shoulders that many, many people who have succeeded in life, you look back and you're like, what was that person's secret? Well, it was just that they didn't want to be where they were today and they were motivated to get out of that. So I ended up at the Naval Academy because, frankly, it was further from where I lived than the Air Force Academy was. And so I just wanted to get away from Illinois. Both of them accepted me. So I went to the Naval Academy, and, it's just crazy. Just, I was living in this weird world where everyone that was there around, not everyone, but many of the people that I was in my dormitory with me and everything, they had this serious struggle after the second year, because after you were there for 2 years of school, if you went to class the first day of your third year, you were required to pay back somewhere between 2 and 7 more years after that. And there were some of them that were just mortified. Like, they skipped school for 3 days, and because they didn't want to, do the commitment. And I was just jumping for joy. I'm like, are you serious? These guys are going to guarantee me that they'll pay me for 7 more years. So, it's just a different world. And I was really, really aggressive, always have been. And so I got an opportunity to become a Marine, which I loved because I really, at the time, really enjoyed fitness. And I loved the camaraderie of that unit, of that organization. And then I was able to be a submarine. So it was either Marine or submarine. And I remember asking somebody, and they said, well, you know what? The promotion rates are higher here. And then they talked about, all of the things that were advantages in the Marine Corps. I wanted money at the time. So I chose for the one that had higher promotion rates and higher, and I'd always wanted to be a mechanical engineer. So I just found it kind of interesting. So I went and interviewed for the submarine force. No idea why, but the admiral chose me. And I spent 25 years in nuclear submarines. And that culminated in commanding the USS Tucson from 2008 to 2011. And that was a really unique time, of course. It was the Great Recession. I paid no attention. I shouldn't say I commanded for that whole time. I commanded from like 2009 to 11, but there was a prep period, and I was paying no attention to anything financially. Right before getting on my submarine, I went to see so back then, right, you didn't do everything online. And so my financial advisor, I got a new one every time I went to a new base. And this was a market-based advisor, typical kind of advisor, nice person, but he was like 25 years old, maybe 24. And here I am, 41, about to command 165 people in harm's way, physically doing, direct orders from the president, right? So I wasn't like offended. But he started giving me advice, and I was like, well, so is that where you have your money? Just simple questions. And he's like, well, I don't actually have anything to invest yet, right? And so I was a little alienated when I left the office, and I had this like mental note, pay more attention when you're done with this command tour and figure out what finances are all about. And so I go off, and I'm also like spending a ton of time on this ship, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to get out after this because I have amassed $1 million, which at the time was a lot, especially for a guy who started with nothing 20 years earlier. And so I'm like, I have enough. I want to spend time around my boys now. And they were young little guys, and I really valued what my father had been able to do for me. Like, he didn't pass any money, obviously, but he passed, who is it who says that wealth is what you pass to your kids, but legacy is what you pass inside your kids, right? Something like that. And so I realized that, all of my successes were really, it was hard work, but it was from what my dad had, spent the time to teach me while we were working alongside hoeing beans or whatever we were doing. And so I wanted to do that with my kids. And so now I leave command and I have less than half that money. I have like $500K, lost over 50%. And here's the thing. When I was on the submarine, the whole time if we had a reactor plant alarm, or we had a submarine that showed up out of nowhere, or we had a leak, a seawater leak or something, I had, 100 plus people on the ship, and they would show up in these supervisory roles with their procedures, and they would say, listen, here's our plan. And I'd approve it. And then a couple hours later, it'd give me updates. And I felt like I was in control. And then this polar opposite mirrored world that I was in my finances, for 2 to 3 years, I didn't get one phone call, text, email, anything at all. And when I woke up and realized I'd lost half my money and there was no notifications, I felt like everybody was asleep. And it taught me a lot about having control over things that are important in your life. And so that's what caused me to kind of throw myself into figuring out what in the world happened.
And then you got out, and then that led you into the role you have now.
Yeah, thanks. So I did want to get out to see my sons and spend more time with them, but I ended up having to spend 5 more years in the Navy working remotely, like 3 hours from home, and driving on the weekends down to DC and Annapolis area, because I just didn't feel like I had enough money with the pension to pull off the lifestyle that I wanted. So I used that time as what we call the geographic bachelor in the military, meaning that I didn't see my family during the week, and I would see them on the weekends or long weekends or something. And so I just threw myself into, didn't have a TV. I just threw myself into studying everything I could about personal finances. And that was that journey I took, learning from the world's greats about what they did and what they didn't do and why and what was important and what were the lessons learned. And it's, I came across an amazing friend at the time. I was throwing all my money into real estate from the markets. I really at the time couldn't explain why. My amazing friend, Aaron Chapman, helped me out with mortgage lending. And then another guy, Patrick Donahoe, who owns Paradigm Life, dear friend of mine, my life insurance advisor at the time, and what I would call an alternative investing wealth strategist, right? So he's helping me with all things holistic in my life, not just market-based assets, and taught me a lot of incredible lessons that have stuck with me. And one of those that resonated deeply because of the story I just told you was that the risk you take on in your financial life is inversely related to how much control and insight you have over what your money's doing. And so I knew in my gut that I had to pull money out of this slot machine that I had left it in for 25 years, which just demonstrated to me that I wouldn't know when the correction was coming nor have any control, right? So I needed to pull it to a position where I felt like I had more control. All I really knew was, hard work on a submarine and hard work on a farm. And those were places where I was directly involved with the results. And so for whatever reason, that led me to real estate. And I've had a majority of my capital in real estate and my own directly owned businesses ever since. Patrick Donahoe, in this really, really cool analogy and financial kind of proprietary software system that he's put together, enables me now to help other clients understand those same lessons. And if I could get the listeners to just grasp one lesson, I'll go back and repeat that one, that your level of risk on whether you ever see your money again is directly related to, or it's inversely related to how much control you have. So if you have a lot of control over your money, meaning like who's got it, what are they doing with it, when are they going to give it back to you, and is it going to bring a return? Like if you have not just insight or a hypothesis about that, but if you can actually control the results of that, then you're very, very low risk. And as you give up control, as you bring other people in between you and your money, then you start to take on risk. Bottom line.
Yeah, so interesting. That's such an interesting journey. I really want to get into some of the lessons that you learned too. We tend on the show to talk a lot about teams and building teams and what works and what doesn't. And I'm sure you've got a number of lessons to share about your time in the Navy. So we'll do that on the other side of the break. So stay with us on the Clarity Advisor Show.
Is your business where you want it to be or on track to get there? Clarity Advisors helps business leaders improve communication and get your team aligned and engaged for greater success. We specialize in helping you streamline your sales and operating systems to improve efficiency and grow your profits. Call or text Ken at 616-822-2998 to have a complimentary 12-minute call to see what some clarity could do for you.
Okay, welcome back to the Clarity Advisor Show. Today we're talking with Gary Pinkerton. So Gary, talk about your time in the military. What lessons did you learn being on teams and leading teams?
Oh gosh, this would be a 6-part series, I think. It was, first of all, it was one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. I mean, it was a large part of my life, right? It's still over half of my life. And yet it was, so it was rewarding. It was challenging every day. And, but I learned most about leadership, like you just said. You learn the most when you work for good leaders and bad leaders, I guess, both in this case. Unlike what Donald Trump said about never learning anything in the good times, I learned tremendous stuff from really, really good leaders. I probably did get more hard-hitting, painful lessons from bad leaders. Because they didn't embrace things that are just fundamental to good character. People, probably one of my leaders on a submarine was the most difficult guy to work with. We lost more people just out of stress and them just quitting. And it was because he didn't handle stress well. I mean, the leader just did not handle stress well. He's a very smart person. But as soon as stress hit him, oh my gosh, he turned into kind of a tyrant. Didn't listen to his advisors. Like he stopped the listening. You want to surround yourself with people who give you good wisdom and good advice, but you got to listen to them, And so I was thankfully one of those people that he did listen to, and I was able to shape things a little bit on the submarine, and we survived. those great leaders, though, are the individuals who understand the talent that they have in the people below them. And they also understand what they're, not just that they are talented, but what specifically their unique talents are. And every one of us, some can lead better, some can lead by example, some can, operate their ship better than others. Some have a better way of getting the troops to do what they need to do on a Saturday or a Sunday, right? So there's different elements of leadership. I have always really prided myself, first and foremost, in leading by example. And I can remember one of my COs, when you used to load the old versions of submarines, we didn't have these cool hatches that you could just screw out and drop the and just lower down all the food on these pre-filled pallets kind of thing. And you can kind of eat your way through them in order. That was pretty cool. But what we did on my attack submarines, actually all of my submarines, my attack submarines, is that we would do the fire bucket brigade of bringing food onto the ship. Like you line the whole crew up and you do that, right? Well, the officers didn't normally do that because we had more important stuff to do. And I never really believed in that. And so here I am, the chief engineering officer on the ship, and I'm bucket brigading the food because I want people to say like, hey, I'm not better than you. And I eat this stuff too, right? That's my vision. Kind of the more Marine Corps version, right? That's some of the stuff that appealed to me about them. In the Marine Corps, the soldiers are the men always eat first, right? The soldiers, the enlisted, eat first. And then if there's anything left, the officers get to eat, right? And so it's just an amazing culture. I've always liked that. So here I am doing this on my submarine, and the CO is like, listen, I need you to fix this. I need this paperwork from you. I have people that we pay a lot less to go do that. Okay, I get it. But you didn't have to do that in public in front of everyone, right? And so there's that whole leadership by example is really important to me. And also, this isn't about that story. Like he didn't do that one in that much public, but I have seen people make, big time public reprimands. And so one of the things I was taught very, very early in the military, and it just makes sense if you just think about it, is, and it definitely works in corporate America, is important in corporate America, is that anytime you have something critical to say about somebody, we call it in the military reprimand in private. I don't think you should probably actually reprimand in corporate, world, but being critical of somebody's actions or their ideas, if you can do that in private but then go out of your way to praise people in public, like as often as possible, and give people credit for things that maybe you had a big hand in, it doesn't cost anything, right? It doesn't cost anything but your own pride. And if you have a ton of pride and that's important to you, maybe consider another line of work, because leadership is going to be a very lonely place. So that's a few of the initial things, I guess.
Yeah, and so knowing what you know from your time there, and people say things are different now, different generations. What is your best advice for leaders today? What do you think is different? What do you think is the same?
Boy, I always I had this tendency to dumb down or underappreciate the challenges of things that change. I remember we were very new to having, for example, females at the Naval Academy, and then females on our submarines, right? So I went through all of that transition. And I always I don't know if it was dumbing it down or my opinion was always, it's just not that hard. And so I realized, like, we're all people, right? I get there are some physical differences we need to accommodate. But, if you think about, yes, today's generation, a lot different. The people in my generation would say that the young Americans don't want to work and COVID messed them up or something, right? Like they don't have any social skills and they have no loyalty. That stuff was around when I was young too. And so I always try to hold myself back from saying it's not that different. It's just that we're getting older and we're less tolerant and we're saying the stuff that our parents used to say when we rolled our eyes. There is a way to appeal and to inspire today's Americans, just like there was in the past, and they're not that much different. The thing that I didn't appreciate, because I didn't have to in the military very much, like retention was important, right? Retaining nuclear qualified individuals on submarines is always hard because they're in high demand out in the civilian world. And because they're just hard workers and they have a very high intellect, right? And so you have a young enlisted guy who on a surface ship probably doesn't have a high school degree and, is there because he otherwise would be in prison maybe. And on a nuclear submarine, he's got a master's degree, right? It's just a different character of person. And so they're very hard to retain. So yes, retention there is harder, but I could throw money at it. I could give them cushy shore duty assignments and things like that. In the real world, the only reason you're going to retain people in your company is because they believe in it. They want to be a part of something bigger than them. You can't pay them enough, or if you do, it's It's kind of like prostitution, right? So it's not going to be a great culture if that's your solution. And so what you want to do is you want them to want to work for you and work twice as hard as they're getting paid for because they believe in what you're doing. That's only going to happen if people understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. And so having your vision statement out there, living it, oh my gosh, I can't tell you how many companies I've been around or ships where the commanding officer or the president or the CEO couldn't themselves reiterate what their vision statement is. And it certainly wasn't posted anywhere. So in the submarine force, when I went through the command training pipeline, they made us write it out and they critiqued it and they said, do you really mean this? And so, we finally got what we really meant on paper, one pager. And then we had to post it outside our door. And guess where people stand when you're late for a meeting because you asked them to come up there and they're apparently not important because I'm, going over with somebody else, right? And guess what they get to stare at? And they come in and give you well, your statement says this and this and this, and you're not living it, right? So that really makes you, anyway, I recommend that. Tell people what you're about, post it so they don't forget, and then live by it. That's really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. That consistency and I know you talk a lot on your show about consistency, honesty, integrity as those kind of core values that frankly this country was founded on and that are still important today, and that when we forget them, that's when things tend to go sideways. And they're important in the military, they're important in leadership, they're important in business, they're important in families. Yeah, talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know why I want to make this distinction at this moment, but hopefully it's valuable. I've been asked all throughout my career, when I was an ethics instructor at the Naval Academy, as I was ending my career, people would always say, well, what's the difference between honesty and integrity? And for some reason, like everybody else, I would just tie the two together. It was probably what we learned at the Naval Academy about those. And it's very hard to distinguish them if you're in the mindset that they're the same. And the thing you need to figure out about integrity or understand about integrity is it just means that I am consistent with who I'm supposed to be, right? So if I'm a female goat, I'm acting like a female goat, right? That's an integrity. If I'm a bank robber, I'm robbing banks. I'm not helping people out at the food kitchen. So integrity just means that you are consistent with who you are, what you're about. Maybe being in integrity also is like posting on the wall what you really mean and then do it, right? So that's being in integrity. Most of the time we talk about it in the frame of reference of honesty. Well, the thing about honesty is it is in the end the most important thing. If anybody ever thinks you're lying, then there's no trust, obviously, and then they don't want to be around you, and so the company falls apart, your customers go away, your family falls apart. And one of the most important lessons I try to teach my kids and everyone who's worked for me is that bad news always gets worse with time. The absolute most important thing you can do when you realize there's a grenade in the room is jump on it. So if there is bad news that you have to tell or needs to be told, then just tell somebody, tell the person who needs to hear it as soon as physically possible. And it's okay to say, we had this statement also at the Naval Academy, when you're asked a question that you don't know the answer to, which was most of the day, because they just asked unreasonable amounts and told you to study unreasonable amounts of stuff just to put you in stress. But there was this thing that if you made up an answer, oh my gosh, that was a bad day. But if you didn't know the answer, you just said, I'll find out, sir. Now, did you have to do push-ups because you didn't know the answer? Yes. But it was nowhere near as bad as making something up. And so, circling back to when, bad news gets worse with time, there have been many reports that I've made, whether it's over a radio to the boss or just to my boss on the ship if I was in a more junior position. Hey, this just happened. Here's what I think the impact is. I don't know why it happened. I don't know what the solution is yet. And then run off, right? But at least you've announced the alarm. So when a fire or some other casualty happens on a submarine, imagine a fire breaks out where you are and you're right next to a fire extinguisher. Everyone's gut feel is either to run the other way, which is really bad, or second best, to become a hero and grab the fire extinguisher and put it out. But here's the thing. If you die with that fire extinguisher in your hand, then the ship probably burns out of control before anybody else knows it even happened, right? So the first thing we have to do is ignore our instincts to run away, ignore our instinct to put it out, and pick up the phone and report it, right? And so I'm not sure why I went down this thing, but I just want people to know, because this has actually happened in my current business, where somebody has known something and they've been really nervous about saying anything about it. And it just made it worse, far worse. So anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a great leadership principle that to share what you know when you know it, whether it's good or bad, and especially when it's bad. Like you said, bad news does not age well. We're not talking about wine and cheese here. older is
Yeah.
not better. Like it's when it's fresh is when it's best served. And so get it on the table. What I've also found that allows is that people can rally around then. If I know
Yeah.
what's up, now I can jump in and try to help. If I don't know there's a
Exactly.
problem, well, I can't help because I don't know that there's an issue. So holding things in
Yeah.
as leaders is usually unwise. Now you don't want to overshare. I mean, there's obviously the other end of the spectrum. You start sharing everything or everything you're worried about or think could happen. That's not what we're talking about. But when there's actual bad news and you have the facts, share what you know. And frankly, 2020 was a great year for that. We didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know necessarily what was even happening, but we shared what we knew when we knew it and said, this is all I've got right now. As there's more coming in, I'll let you know, and try to navigate it so that people just, could participate in the solution and at least feel like they know what everyone else knows and nobody's hiding things from them and nobody's keeping things from them. I think those are great leadership principles.
Yeah. Thank you. It's also that, we've surrounded ourselves with those A players that complement us and have strengths where we don't. And then if we don't tell them, right, then like you said, we can't get them to come to bear and help us out. They can also do a great job of helping set perspective. So again, being the leader is a very lonely place sometimes. And, these individuals can help you, put it in better perspective and realize, maybe what some options are out there that you just weren't thinking about because you weren't in the right mindset.
Right. Yeah, we've got a team for a reason, and it's because we have complementary strengths and talents, and you want to tap into that, especially when there's bad news. So, well, listen, Gary, you've definitely shared stories and such in a way that I know you're a learner. You mentioned specifically that period of time where you were just digging in deep on financial stuff. What are you currently consuming, podcasts, books, audiobooks, whatever, to keep yourself filled up so that you can turn around and share and guide?
Yeah. So the most important thing I focus on is a positive growth mindset and abundance. And so I make sure that, I've learned over time as I age that sleep is so incredibly important. And so I want to make sure that I have this routine where if I'm doing it correctly, I have it optimizes sleep. And so you can wake up with a better chance of having optimism, and your being tired doesn't put you in a bad mood in the middle of the day, keeps your kind of head straight. But when I'm consuming things, I'm trying to consume, I'm first and foremost consuming things that bring abundance and optimism. I have a few books that I revisit every year, just as a routine. The Bible is certainly one of them. And then Atlas Shrugged is my favorite because it's got agency all over it. It's got Galt's Gulch in my podcast, Gary's Gulch, right? So clearly I really believe in what Ayn Rand was trying to do, and I want to help carry that football forward for her. And, Think and Grow Rich, the most important aspects about that amazing book are in the title. He didn't say act and grow rich or, walk along ways, go to work a lot and grow rich. He said, think. And so thinking is so incredibly important because what happens, I also read Dr. Is it D'Souza? I might have that wrong, but the book is Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself or something like that. Anyway, it's about, he talks a lot about 3D MRIs and the actual watching of neurons forming and breaking bad habits of breaking bad neurons. And so basically just using habits long enough or acting long enough that it becomes a good habit, breaking bad ones. But it's also the concept of thinking it in your mind. And so actively, consciously focusing on it long enough that the subconscious takes over and does it for you. That's really the point of making a habit is, you do something long enough that becomes a habit. So you think about it enough, you get up and go work out, or you read that important book, or you, whatever, in your business long enough that the subconscious just says, got it. I understand. I'll do that from now on. Right. And so those are the kinds of things I'm reading, abundant, optimistic things. I'm reading about longevity. I'm in that kind of phase of my life. I don't want to cut my life short and my ability to add value on this planet just because I haven't paid attention to some things that are obvious in science today. I do follow some conservative kind of stuff. The politics always kind of get to me every 4 years. I don't get caught up in it. I have made that mistake in the past. But I want to think about things from different perspectives so I can understand maybe some people who work at my company that I don't necessarily think like, because I want to be open to those ideas. So I think about both sides. Those are the big things. So primarily podcasts anytime I'm not in front of a computer or a book. And then when I am in front of a book and a computer, it's Bible, it is Success Magazine or Success business books. And then a lot lately on legacy. I have a great book here from my friend Kim Butler, who wrote about family legacy and just a ton of things about how we talk to our kids. So those are topics I'm thinking a lot about nowadays.
No, that's great. And we'll get notes or lists of those books in the show notes. So yeah, I appreciate all those recommendations and the rereading. I that caught my ear too. And people have brought that up, and I'm a huge fan of that too. It's not just the reading of the books, but it's the rereading of the books, because the second, third, fifth time, 10th time you go through a book, you're different. And so you're going to get different things out of it. And you're also going to just see things that you didn't catch the first time, because if it's a great, dense book with a lot of great information, it's just too much to take in that first time through. And you've really got to do it justice by going through it multiple times. So I love hearing that you do that as well, that you're multiple times through certain books to continue to draw the riches out of them. So, well, Gary, listen, as we wind down here, what's the best way for people to reach out to you, and who should be reaching out to you?
Well, like I said, individuals who are seeking agency, I have enough members on my team that if you're not at a position that wants to, talk about complex business structures and business succession planning, that's totally fine. If you want agency, there's a member of my team who has the time to help you and would be honored to do so. So business owners, real estate investors, if you want help on, here's an example of somebody who should probably not. If you're reaching retirement at the age of 51 years old, and because your dad did it at 53, right? And you want to one up, and you have a couple $1 million, and you figured out how to stretch that in 35 years of a retirement life, that's not me. Because to me, the word retirement means take out of service, and it means that you're intentionally taking the 60s Ferrari that can still run really good laps, and you're just putting it at the junkyard because it's, you want to put some bicycle in the garage. Like, don't do that. I want to be around people who want to still add value to the world, and they're seeking agency in their own lives, because that makes us all safer and more free. And how do they reach out? The easiest way is just my name. So Gary@GaryPinkerton.com is really the easiest way. I'd be forever grateful if you also listen to my podcast. Go to Gary's Gulch. It's a crazy name, but it harkens back to Ayn Rand, and I'll let you figure out where that is in Atlas Shrugged.
All right, good enough. And we'll get links to your podcast and your email in the show notes as well. So Gary, such a pleasure to get together. I so appreciate you taking time to spend with us going through these things, that concept of agency and guides and the leadership lessons from the time in the military, just so valuable. I really thank you for taking time to share that today.
Awesome. It was absolutely my honor.
Good. Well, we'll get together again down the road. And in the meantime, I appreciate, again, thanks for being here. And that brings us to the end of another Clarity Advisor show. If this was valuable, and I know it was, you're probably actually going to have to go back and listen again to take all the notes. Please leave a review on the platform where you are listening or watching right now, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Clarity Advisor Show. Clarity Advisors is a speaking, training, and consulting firm specializing in helping you simplify your sales and operating systems to improve efficiency and grow your profits. Connect with Clarity Advisors today to learn more about how they can help you improve communication and get your team aligned and engaged for greater success.